guys. So this video is all about vinyasa, not a vinyasa class, but what the heck does it mean to do a vinyasa? You may have been wondering that if you've been doing some of my maybe gentle classes or yin classes and not ventured yet into the realm of more active styles of yoga. So vinyasa is basically where in the maybe the middle of a sequence or at the end of a standing sequence, we go from plank down to chaturanga, which is kind of like the yoga version of doing a push-up, upward facing dog, up dog, and then into down dog. So in vinyasa yoga, power yoga, some other styles of yoga like ashtanga include this sequence of poses in that order, linked with breath. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. We'll go through all the poses and show how to get from one to the other, ways to break them down, maybe make them a little bit easier. I'm going to use a couple of yoga blocks for that. Now here's the disclaimer for you. I do not believe that there is one exact right way to perform that sequence, which is part of why I'm going to give you a few different options to play around with. Some styles of yoga are more dogmatic about that sequence. I am not. I really don't believe that every single body type needs to do it exactly the same way. And I've experimented over the years with lots of different ways to go about it. And so what I'm going to offer today is based on that. And we'll get started by just warming up a little bit to make sure we've moved a little bit. Do a little cat-cow on hands and knees. Get the spine moving a little bit. As you're going through cat-cow, take a look down at your hands and make sure that you're spreading your fingers. Not so much that you are trying to be like a concert pianist playing Chopin, but not too close together. And the hands are about shoulder width, and the wrists are right below the shoulders. And that's going to be our positioning for a good part of that vinyasa sequence. So we want to make sure we can feel that here as well, so we're prepared. And as we're going through this cat-cow, feeling that we're pressing the floor away in each position, right? Trying to make space by pressing. And so we feel activation through the arm muscles, and we're not just like hanging out on our hands, right? So vinyasa is a very active part of yoga, and we can't just hang out, right? We have to be active. There's going to be a lot of weight bearing, obviously, on our hands when we start going through that sequence. So as you're going through cat-cow, you might experiment with some weight shifting, right? As you move your weight forward, so the shoulders go a little bit past the wrist, you'll feel that stretch happening as you go into a deeper bend of wrist extension. Maybe hands turn in some different ways. Fingers in, we'll get you a stretch here. Right, and you can do some wrist stretching without being on your hands too, just to make sure that things are a little bit more warmed up before we start putting more weight on top of that and going into plank, which is the next place we'll get here, the first part of that vinyasa sequence. So as you go into plank, right, again, hands are about shoulder width. And I say about because, like I said, you might adjust that just to fit how it feels for your body. You might be a little wider, a little narrower. It's going to feel different. It's going to activate some different muscles with the stance that you choose. So you might try it a few different ways. I stick with about shoulder width because that's a pretty good baseline for me, and I think for most people, right? want to make sure, so from table, you have stepped your feet all the way back, keeping the shoulders right over the wrists. Yeah? You want to make sure that you're not in cow or in cat, right? More somewhere in the middle so the spine is neutral. And this is a lot, right? If you're not used to doing planks, right? Taking the knees down and feeling that pressing and that stance and that long line through your spine, right? Without so much weight might be helpful. You might try a little bit of plank, knees down, back and forth. Try not to collapse in your back, right? Think of the belly staying up. Okay, so basically, after we get that set up, chaturanga is the next place we're gonna go. And I always giggle because it's a funny word. It's one of the few Sanskrit pose names that has lasted. Chaturanga Dandasana is actually the full name of that pose. And it's a pose, it's a noun, it's a place we're going to. Chaturanga Dandasana means four-limbed staff pose. And I suppose that just saying chaturanga is a little bit easier to spit out than four-limbed staff pose. I don't know, but the name has stuck and it's kind of fun to say. So to get to chaturanga, which is sort of like the bottom of a push-up, but an elbows in push-up, not an elbows out wide push-up. So it focuses a little bit more on the triceps than the chest muscles. And it's really hard, right? Especially if you haven't done it before, if you haven't done a whole lot of upper body strength stuff, which if you're walking into a vinyasa yoga class for the first time and haven't, done push-ups in your life before, right? You're not gonna be good at it, right? So give yourself a break. I'm gonna use blocks just a little bit to show you how to help with that. But basically, we're thinking of bending the elbows about halfway down. So you might do that with your knees down first, right? Again, making sure you're not dumping in your back, right? Thinking straight line. So we're gonna keep elbows in by our sides instead of out wide as we bend them. And maybe not even halfway, maybe just a little bit to start to feel how the upper arm has to work there. And maybe you go a little bit lower each time. About a halfway bend, right? Moving toward a 90-degree bend with the elbows, but try not to get too overly attached to any one particular angle or degree of bend. Going to a place where you can feel like you're working, but not collapsing, and feeling like you're doing something. So one way to help with that, so we don't go too far down, is to put some blocks up on high height so that we can get the shoulders to that near a 90-degree angle bend with some support. All right, I love to practice it this way because it is a visual and a tactical aid, right? So I'm gonna put my hands, so the blocks are about shoulder width, because my hands are gonna be about shoulder width. I'm gonna put the inside of the index finger right against the outer back edge closest to me of the block. So that, and I'll do it with knees down first, so that when I lower down from here, hugging elbows in, I'll get my shoulders down to those blocks. And again, that's, approximately a right angle. And I might try that a few times. Once I get the hang of that, right, I'm not collapsing here, I might try seeing what that feels like, what that position feels like with the block support, but with knees lifted. And if this feels crazy to you, right, so just think about how crazy it's gonna feel when the shoulders are not on the blocks, right? That's a lot of weight down here. Now, I don't know anybody that really thinks you should necessarily hold that chaturanga pose for more than the breath that it takes you to get there, right? I'm not a fan of rushing through any part of a yoga class. I teach slow-paced classes, but for chaturanga, you're not gonna be hanging out there forever and a day. So there is that. What that would look like without having your knees down first, right, is going to there, right? Not collapsing in your lower back. Elbows are in by the sides, right? And another thing that you could do from there, without the blocks, because they'll get in the way, it's not a bad idea to practice also going all the way down to the floor. If you can control the weight of your body lowering all the way down, that gives you more range of motion, right? You can do that in a knee plank, right? Keeping elbows in, lowering down, feeling like you're pressing the floor away, right? And that's not easy, right? That's not cheating, that's hard. You can do that on your toes too, right? Woo, tough. Okay, so that was plank to chaturanga. The next pose in the sequence is upward facing dog, or up dog for short. It's the back bend part of the vinyasa sequence. It is not a just like crank into your back, pose. It is an active back bend, an active part of the sequence, just like the other parts. So a lot of times I'll see people, maybe they've, collapsed to the floor, thinking that's chaturanga, and then they just sort of like, ugh, right? So I'm not really doing anything here. I'm just collapsed in my shoulders and crunching in my low back, and it feels pretty terrible. So that is not upward facing dog. That's not up dog. In up dog, it's basically kind of a planky back bend. So we'll be on the tops of the feet instead of like our feet are in plank on the backs of the toes. So the toes are pointed instead of the feet flexed. We still got plank arms going on, right? We are pressing the floor away and the arms are 100% straight and the shoulders are down and spread. The legs, however, are not on the mat. They are hovering right above the mat. We want to keep a good firm squeeze and muscle engagement through the legs. Otherwise, we might feel like we're cranking in our lower backs, which we don't want to feel like that. Because who wants that? I don't know. So, after you have gone from plank to chaturanga, you're going to push your arms straight and come to the tops of your feet. Squeezing the legs and getting shoulders back. And that's up dog, right? My legs aren't touching. Knees are up, thighs are up and hovering. And it feels okay as long as I'm keeping my legs engaged, right? If I don't engage, I start to feel like I'm just dumping everything into the lower back area, right? Glutes are the primary muscle involved with back bends, which are also known as hip extension poses, right? We're extending through the hips. So if you use them, they usually feel better. So for a lot of people, even though chaturanga has a bad rap for being the hardest part of the vinyasa sequence, right? Up dog is not easy as well because it's weight bearing, right? So we're not just hanging out there. So again, using the glutes is a way to make that a little bit easier. And you could, in fact, if you were maybe doing a chaturanga variation with your knees down and then lowering to your belly, right? Instead of trying to stop there, right? Controlling that. You might be able to find your up dog easier from there by starting to press up from the floor and then giving a little pull so that your lower body can hover. Yeah? One of the other options I give for students who that's still a little bit too much for whatever reason, just a weight-bearing thing, or maybe the wrists are feeling a little bit tender, is if you lower all the way to the mat, instead of going into that full up dog position, one of my favorite back bend variations is baby cobra. So you don't even really need to use your hands so much to go to baby cobra. You can right? But it's more about just using the back muscles. So from your knees down, lower to your belly through chaturanga, you can release your feet and just do a little chest lift. And that would be a baby cobra, which is another, right, another back bend choice. And for some people that just works better and feels better, and you're able to be a little bit more successful and get your back stronger without stressing other things out. So then the next part after up dog is down dog, right? So when we went from chaturanga to up dog, I came onto the tops of my feet. Some people roll on the toes. I flip mine one at a time to go from chaturanga to up dog. And then when we go to down dog, we're gonna come back to quote unquote normal feet, flex feet. So we're on the bottoms of the feet, the backs of the toes, instead of on the tops of the feet. For me, that feels a little bit better rolling from up dog to down dog. It really doesn't matter which way you do it, as long as it feels okay for you, right? So you can try it a few different ways. So after going from plank to chaturanga, flipping to the tops of the feet one at a time, or rolling for up dog, and then we'll push the floor away still as we go into down dog. Going from up dog to down dog, I walk my feet a little bit forward, right? There is a lot of opinion variance with how long your down dog should be. Some people keep it the same length as plank. Some people really shorten it. I'm kind of a fan of somewhere in the middle, right? However you feel like it works best for your body, because we're all built differently and don't have to do things exactly the same, right? So down dog, right, which looks somewhat like an upside down V, so if it helps you have a visual, right, that's what we're going for. Feet are about hip width. Typically in down dog, I like hands even just a little bit wider than shoulder width. So usually I adjust to that a little bit once I get into my down dog. Down dog is more of a shoulder focused pose than the other ones, in my opinion, or it feels that way to me. And I feel like I just have a little bit more space with just a little bit wider stance for my hands. So you can experiment with that as well. I'm going to turn and face the camera so that you can sort of see what the shoulders, what my shoulders look like in down dog. There's a lot of opinions on that as well. Again, I'm not here to tell you that mine is the only right way. I'm just sharing what works for me and what feels best for me. So you can see what works for you. So in down dog, right, I like to feel space between the shoulders. So they're feeling stretchy and strong all at the same time, right? So try not to, have them so close where if you moved your head a little bit, your head would touch your shoulders or your arms, right? Keeping space there. Can move my head around. Neck is clear. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to show you in more of a flow sequence how that vinyasa would look. I'll do a few different variations. So regular, right, if you're not doing any variation, with the breath. So plank is the inhale. Exhale, chaturanga. Inhale, up dog. Exhale, down dog. You may have noticed I added a little neck stretch in the up dog there. If that feels good for you, go for it. If it hurts your neck, look straight ahead. So with knees down, plank, inhale, knees down, exhale, chaturanga, inhale, up dog, exhale, down dog. with knees down, lowering all the way to the belly. Inhale, plank. Knees down, exhale. Lower through chaturanga down. Inhale, up dog, pulling through and hovering the legs. Exhale, downward facing dog. This time instead of up dog, I'll do baby cobra. Inhale, plank, knees down. Exhale to the belly. Inhale, baby cobra. Exhale, downward facing dog. Okay. And then one more thing that you can do with your blocks, right? If you're still feeling like that's too much, right? It's a lot. So just practicing each little bit at a time, like you would any other skill, can be helpful instead of trying to do it all at once. Or if you happen to be like going to a studio and you've walked into a vinyasa class and aren't really sure what's going on, right? Don't feel like you have to do every single thing each time it's called out, right? Maybe you just work on holding your plank and getting stronger there while the teacher is calling out chaturanga and up dog, and then you meet everybody in downward facing dog. Yeah, great ways that you can, still participate in a group setting, but not feel like you're gonna kill yourself, right? If the weight bearing on the hands because of wrists is an issue, right? Getting your hands a little bit higher up on blocks is a great way to take a little bit of that pressure off of the wrist. Sorry, so you can just have those there, right? Plank, chaturanga, up dog, down dog. That actually feels magnificent, and you can do that with knees down as well. Right, it just takes a little bit of the pressure off. Right, so that's another something you can try. I would love to hear your feedback if you have any questions about any of that. Again, there's more than one way to do a vinyasa, and so I've just given you some ideas to play with. And I thank you so much for joining me for this little, not class per se, but this little breakdown session. And I hope to practice with you again soon. Namaste.